Good afternoon, Valeriy Viktorovich. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, dear viewers, audio listeners, and comrades in the studio. Today is June 10, 2024. The main event that took place was the St. Petersburg Economic Forum last week. People would like to hear your thoughts on its importance in global politics, particularly in light of Putin's address during the plenary session. What effect did the forum have, and what are your predictions for future developments? Additionally, the audience would appreciate your comments on Putin's meeting with the heads of international news agencies that took place earlier, on June 5th. What was the meaning of this meeting, and what effects do you foresee?
Вообще вопрос задан правильно в том плане, что объединены были два события. Это общение Путина с руководителями иностранных информагентств.
In general, the question was framed accurately as it combined two events: Putin's communication with the heads of foreign news agencies and his speech at the forum, as they are related parts of a single process.
Суть сегодняшнего момента заключается в том, что мир уже не просто вплотную подошел к глобальной ядерной войне, но
The essence of today's moment is that the world is not just on the brink of a potential global nuclear war, but it is literally hanging by a thread from descending into this global war.
И главное значение, на что было направлено выступление Путина на Петербургском экономическом форуме, ответы на вопросы и его общение с редакторами.
The main objective of Putin's speech at the St. Petersburg Economic Forum, his answers to questions, and his communication with the heads of the global news agencies was to prevent the world from descending into this catastrophe.
И в данной ситуации очень важно было другое. То, что модератором на вот этом Петербургском экономическом форуме был Караган.
In this situation, another important factor was that the moderator at the St. Petersburg Economic Forum was Karaganov, who had been portrayed by the global media as a nuclear maniac aiming to destroy the entire world.
И в результате этого был построен диалог по принципу.
This resulted in the discussion revolving around the premise that, if you are unwilling to negotiate with me, Putin, and respect the interests of Russia, then there can be no peace.
В смысле не только состояние общества без войны, но и как такового мира на земле в смысле самого
Peace,
общества.
not only in the sense of a society being in a state free from war, but also in the sense of humankind, society on planet Earth, because Russia will not permit its own destruction.
России не нужен будет. Зачем России нужен такой мир, если в
Putin,
нем
in his time, articulated this idea by questioning, why would Russia need such a world if there is no Russia in it?
Но в том-то и дело, что мир приблизился к этой ядерной катастрофе потому, что одно дело, когда говорит Путин,
But that's the point. The world is closer to a nuclear catastrophe because of the discrepancy between Putin's words and the behavior of the Rus Zion elites.
И когда Запад смотрит на поведение наших россионских элит, у них полное понимание того, что никакого ответного удара, удара возмездия от России Запад не получит.
When the West observes the behavior of the Rus Zion elites, it is fully aware that Russia will not respond with a nuclear strike, a retaliatory strike. If the West inflicts an all-defeating nuclear strike on Russia, the Rus Zion elite will prevent such a retaliatory strike from occurring. This is evident in all aspects of the Rus Zion elite's behavior. And we'll discuss this issue.
отнюдь не снял вопрос.
As a result, the West has not eliminated the possibility of conducting a nuclear strike as part of the Steadfast Defender exercises. The exercises, which lasted for 4 months, have now concluded. So what? Are the troops returning to their permanent deployment locations and transitioning to peacetime operations? Not at all. A new series of seemingly localized exercises has commenced.
Что Запад готовится к нанесению полномасштабного ядерного удара по России.
In other words, the question of whether the West is gearing up for a large-scale nuclear attack on Russia has become evident.
И он проявился еще и на прошлой неделе, когда Запад заявил о своем желании.
This was particularly evident last week when the West expressed its commitment to fully participating in a war against Russia with their own forces. When the West expresses such participation, it does so with the expectation that there will be no retaliatory response. What am I talking about? In essence, last week saw the entire Western Bloc give permission to carry out strikes against the territory of Russia with the weapons that the West provides to, allegedly, Ukraine.
Общение Путина с руководителями информационных агентств мира, Путин ведь конкретно сказал, что если применяется атакамс,
in a conversation with the heads of global news agencies, Putin made it clear that the use of ATACMS indicates Pentagon participation, while the use of Storm Shadow points to British action. He emphasized that all Western high-tech weapons are used exclusively by NATO countries' military personnel who supply them. If it was ATACMS that was used in an attack against civilian objects resulting in civilian casualties, it was carried out by the Americans. Putin directly stated this. But it is not enough to say that the United States and European countries are involved in the attacks on Russia. All our information channels are flooded with this statement. We know that Western countries are involved in attacks on Russia. What exactly did we know? Well, we were aware that they were supplying M777 howitzers, ATGMs, tanks, and more. Okay, what was our response to this? How did this situation develop to the point where they started using Western weapons against territory inside Russia? Initially, there was a clear message from the West. Oh no, we are not crazy. No way. Using these weapons in such a way would mean being drawn into a war against Russia. Everyone understood this well. There was a sense of anticipation, waiting for a response to happen. Suddenly, there was a shift, like a dam burst, and everyone started talking about it. Giving permission, giving permission, giving permission.
Это означает, когда говорят, что они дают разрешение, что они лично, персонально будут участвовать в войне против России уже в таком качестве.
When they claim to give permission, it implies their direct involvement in a war against Russia in a personal capacity without fear of retaliation from Russia. However, their decision must have been based on something. What grounds could they use to make this decision? Why, all of a sudden, is Scholz now asserting that Ukraine will emerge victorious in the confrontation with Russia and that Russia must engage in negotiations on Ukraine's terms, with Putin needing to acknowledge this? One might wonder why, especially when Ukraine is clearly losing. What are they waiting for?
И начали угрожать России, требовать от нее, чтобы она пошла
What is the reason for their sudden fervor and threats towards Russia, insisting on negotiations on Ukraine's terms and surrender, when even the Swiss, so to speak, peace forum fails to gather momentum and key figures are going to be absent? Moreover, the way Australia mocked the forum by sending the Minister for Disabled People is hilarious. Nevertheless, the situation is very serious. When they look at the battlefield, they see that Ukraine is losing. But why on earth is Scholz, despite having previously declared that they would not send Taurus missiles because using them would lead to a war with Russia, suddenly sending Taurus missiles and demanding surrender from Russia? Are they crazy? No, they are not crazy. They are proceeding from the absolute realities of our time, based on the current circumstances. In this relation, we must consider, what are the conditions for their actions? The central bank stated during the speech that it would not be increasing the key rate. This decision by the central bank alone could potentially prompt the West to launch a nuclear strike on Russia, as it holds more significance than any verbal threats regarding our potential response. What response can be expected from us when we do not have control over our economy? What did Nabiullina say? Nabiullina stated, "Those who opposed the key rate hike and urged us not to increase it have exhausted their resources. Next month, we will definitely raise the key rate and also compensate for this month's inaction." The Russian economy is overheating as it produces shells and goods for the people. Do you realize how hot it is running, with 84% of production capacity in use? This must be stopped. There should be no production of shells and tanks for the front or goods for the people. Nabiullina said so in plain text at the speech. She is unashamed that the West is reducing interest rates to stabilize itself and that military production in the West is operating at over 100% capacity, meaning it is pulling out the entire economy. Oh, so it's considered absolutely correct because it is being produced for killing Russians. Nabiullina has frequently stated that Russia's role should be limited to a resource colony of the West, and therefore there is no need for production within Russia. She has also agreed many times with the idea that for Russia to serve as a resource puppet of the West, it only needs a population of 15 million rather than its current population of 150 million. She is actively implementing this policy, and the government is not intervening to protect the interests of the people. Nabiullina did not raise the key rate this time. However, she stated that the potential of those who support Russia and resist my pressure has been exhausted, and next month, she plans not only to raise the key rate but also to make up for the previous non-increase. In the West, Nabiullina is recognized not only as the best banker but also as the only person in Russia implementing the right policy. There are talks about negotiating with her about the post-Putin era. Putin is already being written off. Nabiullina, with her pro-Western stance and at any expense, is implementing the Western policy of genocide of the Russian people and destruction. Why is that? Because this is the West's goal, and she needs to serve the Western master. She is fully committed to this agenda. Remember how she was named Central Bank Governor of the Year? She is implementing IMF decisions without considering Russia's internal conditions. While other central bank governors may prioritize their country's well-being at least a little, holding forth, "I've got to serve my country," Nabiullina's actions speak for themselves. No, the more severe the consequences, the better. The fewer Russian people, the better. The complete destruction of the economy would be ideal. Nabiullina is focused on serving the West from A to Z. She is not making decisions in the interests of the Russian people. The 16% key rate is a prohibitive rate. One of the most important conditions for our victory in the fields of the special military operation for demilitarization and denazification in Ukraine is the operation of the so-called People's Military-Industrial Complex.
Что такое вот эта ставка в 16%? В рамках нашей войны.
What does a 16% key rate mean in the context of our fight for safety and against global fascism to ensure our survival on this planet? While the state protects the military-industrial complex to some extent from the impact of the key rate, the people's economy is directly influenced by this rate. Have you ever seen the military-industrial complex operating on loans? Additionally, Nabiullina suggests that they should receive commercial loans and reduce the production of shells and consumer goods. Imagine during the Great Patriotic War if someone had suggested, let's, instead of direct financing to the military-industrial complex, give them loans. The military-industrial complex serves the state's interests, and by financing it directly, we avoid paying interest to the parasites. We avoid paying interest to the banks. By paying the military-industrial complex directly, we prevent inflation from rising because there is no parasitic bank involved that gave this loan, which needs to be repaid. Strictly speaking, this saves the state money and keeps inflation in check. However, Nabiullina says, no, let's reduce the production of shells and bullets to create a shortage of ammunition at the front, as that is what our master requires. Anyone who said that during the Great Patriotic War would have been shot. Yet, Nabiullina says this at SPIF in plain text. Does she only say this at SPIF? No, she says this in the State Duma as well. Every time she says this by raising the key rate. Every time she opens her mouth, she advocates for the destruction of Russia as a state and the eradication of the Russian people as an ethnic group. She believes that Russia should cease to exist, leaving only its natural resources for the West to control. She expresses these views openly. How does the State Duma respond to this? There is no reaction at all. The State Duma applauded Volodin when he called for all anti-fascists to be silenced so that no one would dare speak out against the fascist Ilyin, his ideology, or the idea of transforming the culture of the Russian people to replace Bolshevism with fascism, because otherwise the Russian people will not accept an alien culture, will not accept fascism. To prevent anti-fascists from opposing Ilyin, Volodin suggested silencing them. The State Duma applauded. How many members applauded? Was it scattered applause? The State Duma applauded unanimously. And if Russia is ideologically and conceptually subservient to the West, why would they fear it? In Russia, Nabiullina is applauded. She is only allowing herself to take such actions as destroying the country's economy because she is backed by clan corporate groupings. At SPIF, she assumed there would be a significant increase in the key rate.
что произошло? Вот каждый может вспомнить.
What happened next? Everyone can recall the sudden television advertising campaigns by two commercial banks, VTB and SberBank.
Первыми запустили.
They were the first to do so and immediately advertised that they were offering deposits at 18%.
Это означает, что они
This implies that they will cover their costs at an 18% deposit rate. However, this also suggests that the key rate should be at least 20%.
И вот на Западе это увидели. И значит сразу поняли, что все кланово-корпоративные
The West saw this and quickly understood that the clan corporate groupings at the highest levels are aligned against Russia and in favor of the genocide of the Russian people. They support Nabiullina, and therefore, they would work towards enabling a nuclear strike on Russia with all their efforts. I reiterate that while the state protects our military-industrial complex to some extent, Nabiullina's interest rate burden falls on whom? This burden falls on the civilian sector. She is burning out the entire economy of the country like napalm. What does it mean? It means small and medium-sized enterprises go bankrupt, people lose their salaries, and prices rise. By the way, gas station prices have increased again. This is a significant issue that will be discussed further in relation to the actions of our general staff. These economic challenges directly impact the ability of the people to support our army. The people's military-industrial complex relies on the resources of the people.
Центральным банком в условиях, когда нужно будет просто выживать, как в 90-е годы, а именно этого добивается Набиуллина, чтобы люди умирали от голода, не имея возможности купить продукты.
If the central bank purposefully puts people in conditions where they are struggling just to survive, as was the case in the 1990s, which is exactly what Nabiullina is aiming for, to push people to the brink of starvation, unable to buy food, then those who are unable to secure their own survival will no longer be able to support our army. The people's military-industrial complex is agile and responsive to the needs of the front lines. While the state is getting ready to act, the people's military-industrial complex steps in immediately to assist the front.
Повышая ставку и держа ее на таком уровне, который ведет к обнищанию народа, к закрытию мелкого и среднего бизнеса.
By raising and maintaining the key rate at a high level, which is leading to the impoverishment of the people, the closure of small and medium-sized businesses, and forcing people to fight for survival when they can't even afford food, she is exacerbating an already existing resource shortage faced by the People's Front. This results in increased casualties on the front lines. Nabiullina's actions with the key rate are effectively causing the deaths of our soldiers on the front lines. She is intentionally perpetrating genocide against the Russian people, undermining the Russian army, maximizing losses, and destroying the people's military-industrial complex. But, I reiterate, she is not acting alone.
Она может творить вот это все только если ее поддерживают россионские, подпиндосные, кланово-корпоративные.
She is able to accomplish all of this with the support of the Rus Zion, pro-American Lackey clan corporate groupings who are interested in collaborating with the West, serving as mere suppliers of resources for the West. We observed this. The first to reveal themselves were VTB and SberBank. The West also sees this. They see what the Rus Zion clan corporate groupings are focused on.
И соответственно этому, когда было объявлено, что мы знаем, что по нам бьют западным оружием не какие-то там условные украинцы, а кадровые военные из стран НАТО, которые предоставили это оружие, то Запад правильно считал.
Therefore, when it was reported that we do know we were being hit with Western weapons not by the so-called Ukrainians but by career military from NATO countries that provided these weapons, it became clear that the West had received the signal. You are free to cross this red line. We are aware and we support this because it damages Russia, undermines the Russian state, and destroys the Russian people. However, it is not sufficient when only the civilian sector sends these signals. It becomes significant when the military also supports these signals. What do we see? We see a continuous presence of reconnaissance drones flying and targeting various missiles towards objects within Russia. These drones are not being shot down or damaged in any way, indicating that there will be no consequences for the West for these actions. This signal from the General Staff is well understood in the West. They can see that our General Staff is not destroying the military infrastructure of Ukraine, allowing the rear operations to work like clockwork and logistics to function smoothly. In this regard, let's discuss the increase in fuel prices in Russia and our General Staff. This week, various videos from Ukraine have been circulating, showing streets in Odessa lined with generators. There are small shops, offices, and cafes, all equipped with generators. They are everywhere. The generators are lined up in rows. I have a question in this regard. Generators require fuel. When the special military operation for demilitarization and denazification started, one of the initial targets for our attacks was the storage bases for fuel and lubricants. Within a very short period, I emphasize, within a very short period, Ukraine has been put in a situation of fuel shortage, where military vehicles would stop at gas stations and drain them dry. No fuel could have been used for the civilian sector, as there was not enough fuel for the military, making it impossible to move. If you cannot move, then you have no combat activities. What do we see now? The generators are operating. There are lots of generators. This indicates an ample supply of fuel that exceeds the needs of the civilian sector. But this week, a scandal has erupted in Ukraine, sparking widespread discontent.
В настоящее время в действующей армии, вот это в вооруженном сброде Украины, существует повальная...
It has been revealed that there is a prevalent practice of fuel dumping and theft in the active army of Ukraine, in the armed rabble of Ukraine. The stolen fuel is either sold at a low price to the civilian sector or simply vanishes. The question arises, why is this happening?
Так весь вопрос в том, что горючего для ВСУ, для вооруженного сброда Украины настолько много...
The reason behind this issue is the excessive surplus of fuel available for the AFU, armed formations of Ukraine, which is then misused and even leaked into the civilian market. There is an enormous amount of fuel, it's simply abundant. The surplus of fuel is so vast that there is insufficient storage capacity in Ukraine to contain it. They burn this fuel left and right because it is being supplied from Russia. The fuel is provided free of charge on the condition that the armed rabble of Ukraine wage war against the Russian army and kill Russian people. I don't recall the State Duma showing further concern about the investigation they announced and promptly closed. How does fuel from Russia magically end up in the hands of Ukrainian armed formations? Initially enthusiastic, we'll investigate this issue. They later dismissed it. Oh well, what's there to investigate? We are all human. We all understand everything perfectly. We live in a capitalist society. Why is that? Oh, because capitalism and socialism totally have different approaches to patriotism, right? So under capitalism, it's totally fine to let your compatriots get killed as long as it lines your pockets. Is it only under socialism that people actually care about protecting each other? What do we witness? Soldiers at the forefront are fighting under the original Russian Red Banner, sacrificing their lives and well-being to protect their country, ensure the safety of children, and maintain peace. Meanwhile, under the white-blue-red tricolor, traders are selling out the country by providing resources to Russia's adversaries, enabling them to wage war. They are supplying Czechia with metal to produce shells that eventually kill our soldiers. They are providing fuel, food, and other resources to Russia's enemies, enabling them to wage war against Russia. Without the supply of these resources, the enemies would not have the means to wage war. Now, tell me, what grounds does the West have to believe that Russia, with its current elite, would retaliate against the West? They are planning a nuclear strike on Russia, confident that there will be no repercussions. They see the behavior of our elite. They see how the war is being conducted by our general staff when the general staff protects Ukraine's rear so that our army can engage an enemy that has all the advantages of waging war against us, and how our planes are shot down by our own forces allegedly in friendly fire. Explain to me, don't we have a friend or foe system in place? Our reconnaissance aircraft are being shot down by our own general staff. At least 2 A-50s and 1 Il-22 aircraft have been shot down by, allegedly, our friendly fire. That is, our general staff shot down our reconnaissance aircraft, which were providing soldiers with intelligence information. Truth be told, the general staff never shared this information with the soldiers anyway. Therefore, our intelligence officers, like during the Great Patriotic War, have to venture beyond the front line to locate the next train unloading point and then coordinate artillery strikes on it. Our planes are being shot down, while not a single enemy strategic-level aircraft is being shot down. The elite's position is clear. You can fight at the front however you like, but the Reaper drone that will be flying and directing missiles, don't dare to touch. It is the masters. Do the lives of the Russian people hold any significance when the master could become upset? The master's objective is the annihilation of all Russians. And I'm helping him out in reaching this objective, serving the master's interests. The entire elite operates in this manner. The entire elite is striving for this objective. The war they are dragging Russia into has an alternative task that is different from planning a nuclear strike, where various factors are at play. If the opportunity arises, they will launch a nuclear strike, and I have no doubts about it. However, this does not mean that one task excludes the other. If the opportunity for a nuclear strike does not present itself, an alternative task is planned. What is this alternative task? This alternative task involves mobilizing all patriots and volunteers in Russia to join the front lines and perish, leaving in Russia only pro-American lackeys who have been influenced over the past 30 years, such as the Kolya from Urengoy types, and are willing to repent to any aggressor and lick their heels and butts in exchange for favor. They need Russia to overstrain itself. What is Nabiullina trying to achieve? She is attempting to create a situation in Russia where famine and a collapse in production occur, leading to a different scenario in the war and spreading the war everywhere. Migrants are being brought in, and weapons depots are being set up for them. Is it a secret to anyone that the national centers of various diasporas have become hubs for planning attacks on Russian people? Or maybe ethnic crime among youth is not a growing concern? It is just that young people engage in criminal activities even before receiving a signal to do so, wishing to rob, rape, and kill, so they take to the streets. They have been brought in for this purpose. Russians living abroad who want to return to Russia face difficulties in obtaining passports and citizenship, while migrants are granted these documents swiftly. The Migration Service is welcoming gang members and terrorists with a red carpet, crawling on its belly, to grant them Russian citizenship. Thus, in the event that a nuclear strike is not launched on Russia, the plan is to bleed Russia dry and plunge it into the abyss of war, which will not impact the extraction of natural resources, of course. The West is gearing up for war. Everyone understands that Ukraine's resources won't last long. This implies that other countries' resources will have to be utilized soon. Potential candidates for this utilization include Moldova and the 3 Baltic dying out countries. Their armies are very small and only combat ready on paper, but they could be utilized in a war against Russia, as they are preferable to mobilizing untrained civilians off the streets of Ukraine, who are being grabbed and packed in cars and then sent to fight, because they yet possess some level of military training, even though they lack combat experience naturally. Of course, the mobilized civilians also lack combat experience, but these armies at least have military training, despite their dwarf size. Everyone understands perfectly well that these armies will not be enough. But who is next? The next are Romania and Slovakia, as evidenced by the attempted assassination of Fico. It is crucial for Fico and the forces behind him to exercise caution. Lastly, Poland is next, and naturally, Germany will follow. Germany is already claiming the necessity of preparing to wage war against Russia. A mobilization database is being established, mandating all young people to complete a registration form provided by the Ministry of Defense. Failure to comply will result in legal consequences, with fines being the minimum penalty. They are gathering information on people's location, identity, and capabilities to facilitate future conscription into military service and deployment. When it is claimed, currently, they will not be able to fight in this state, it is false. In the West, fascism is a fully functional form of governance over the state. They will be able to fight. And, as practice has shown, they operate very effectively under this regime.
И вот в этих условиях, когда для России куда ни кинь и всюду.
In these conditions, when there is a threat to Russia in one way or another, it is necessary to resolve the situation. What does it mean?
Это значит, нужно довести информацию, которая бы охладила горячие головы на Западе, которые бы поняли.
It means conveying information that would calm down hotheads in the West, making them realize that neither a nuclear attack on Russia nor a prolonged war using pro-American puppet, Rus Zion elite, like Gref, Kostin, Nabialina, Silwanov, and other bastards will help them.
И в этом отношении мы возвращаемся.
In this regard, let's revisit the moderation at SPIF, where Karaganov served as the moderator. They purposefully created the image of a nuclear maniac in him.
И если посмотреть, как проходила вот эта сессия, то Караганов постоянно
During the session, Karaganov consistently advocated for extreme measures such as bombing and destruction.
А ему отвечал Putin и говорил,
Putin responded to him by saying that wouldn't be necessary. We should move away from such rhetoric. This is not beneficial to any of the parties involved. He emphasized, fellas, you either reach a mutually beneficial agreement that considers Russia's interests with us or not. We cannot stop the SMODD halfway and start negotiating. Our goal is to achieve the objectives of the special military operation in Ukraine, which include the demilitarization and denazification of Ukraine. We cannot allow any breeding ground for Bandera or a foothold for future war with Russia. This is something that the Rus Zion elite is striving for, not us. While Putin frequently references the Istanbul agreements, he is balancing on the edge of committing a foul. The Istanbul agreements have not been released to the public yet, but the details that have been revealed indicate the horrifying nature of the agreement. According to the agreements, Russia was essentially surrendering its sovereignty and independence, with all of its international policies becoming subject to the decisions of China and other guarantor countries. No way! Oh, what an agreement! In the interests of Russia, or what? Anyway, the West has been put in a situation of either or. Namely, it has been emphasized that there is a certain elite in Russia that will not allow the destruction of Russia in order to prevent the destruction of the West. In this regard, they align with the plans of the global predictor.
Потому что ситуация для глобального предиктора состоит в следующем. Если Россия будет уничтожена, то не будет планеты. Потому что все, вот этот джин американский, все пожирающий, он вырвется из своих...
The situation for the global predictor is as follows. If Russia is destroyed, the planet will not survive, as the all-consuming American genie will be unleashed from the constraints holding it back, leading to the collapse of the planet. The only way to survive is by preserving Russia. In this context, the option, why does Russia need a world in which there is no Russia, is more preferable for globalists, the global predictor, as it allows them to survive this catastrophe. Because the main force posing the most significant absolute danger to civilization on planet Earth, Pax Americana, the American way of life, and the forces of the American empire devouring the planet's resources, would be eliminated. Therefore, even if Russia ceases to exist, there will still be corners of the planet where survival is possible. However, if American hegemony persists, survival would be impossible anywhere, as they would consume everything.
И поэтому такие, как Караганов, и заговорили о том, что вот он только один вариант.
This is why people like Karaganov have emphasized that there's only one option. If you try to attack Russia, you will cease to exist.
Но сколько можно заявлять?
But how many times can one repeat the same message? You will cease to exist if you don't stop violating our red lines, without following through with action. Talk is cheap. The West keeps crossing the red lines, supplying weapons and giving permission to use them. However, Russia, referring to the Rus Zion elite, gleefully obeys the master, gazing into his eyes. Master, we have once again facilitated your ability to harm Russia, yet there has been no retaliation. This is in stark contrast to the statements made by Putin and Karaganov. The West thinks, well, yes, there is some kind of elite there. But how they maneuver? Well, we'll see. We'll figure something out. The problem is Putin. This is the West's view of the situation. The West fails to grasp that Putin is a personification of the collective consciousness of the Russian people.
Здесь правильно, абсолютно правильно поставил задачу проведения вот этой дискуссии.
Karaganov correctly initiated a discussion in which Putin participated.
И он сказал, что если мы не покажем нашу готовность к эскалации,
Karaganov addressed the need to show our preparedness for escalation, warning that if we fail to do so, we will either be defeated, we will lose this clash, in the worst-case scenario, or, in the best-case scenario, the world will plunge into a third world nuclear war.
Он привел пример, что для того, чтобы шакалов, гиен,
He used an example to illustrate that to calm down jackals and hyenas, instead of trying to fight them off with sticks and teasing, it is more effective to eliminate one or two specimens, causing the rest of the flock to scatter in fear.
Все противостояние происходит только лишь потому, что россионское, вот это вот нарастание, и мы подошли к ядерной войне, происходит только лишь потому, что наша россионская элита.
All the current confrontation and escalation, we are on the brink of a nuclear war, are occurring because our Rus Zion elite is extremely fearful of causing harm to their Western masters. For example, Gerasimov, excuse my French, is pissing and shitting in his pants at the mere thought of inflicting harm.
Очень жестко поговорил с Остином, министром обороны Соединенных Штатов.
Remember how after Shoigu spoke firmly to U.S. Secretary of Defense Austin, Gerasimov initiatively contacted his counterpart, the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Milley, and reassured him, don't mind Shoigu. I will never allow any harm to come to Americans. You can harm Russia without facing any repercussions. He even shared this with the media to curry favor with his master. By the way, when the question arises, why don't they remove Nabialina? Why don't they remove Gerasimov? The answer is that with such a governance core, we entered the war, and now all that remains are maneuvers. Yes, there are some purges happening, but while we sentence pro-American lackeys, the pro-American lackeys in turn start arresting field generals. Is this the path we want to take? Risking a complete collapse of the state and triggering a full-scale civil war? They have already brought in migrants for this purpose. The force that will be killing Russians has already been smuggled into Russia, and they keep bringing more. The recent terrorist attack at Crocus City Hall highlighted the consequences of smuggling for migrants under the existing conditions. Instead of bringing in skilled specialists, we are faced with individuals who do not speak the language and refuse to embrace Russian culture. There is a Russian proverb, "Don't go to another monastery with your own rules." Nonetheless, they come and demand that the local population conform to their customs. This situation is supported by the prosecutor's office, the court, and the police, who stand with migrants against the Russian people.
Так вот, как показать вот эту готовность идти на
Now,
эскалацию?
how can we show our preparedness for escalation if we witness the complete corruption of our Rus Zion elite?
Именно на нее ориентируется в повышении уровня противостояния, в повышении вот этой эскалации.
The West relies on this elite when raising the level of confrontation, escalation, in hopes of destroying Russia.
Значит, Запад
Is the West solely afraid of Putin?
Значит, нужно показать, что
This implies we must showcase actions at Putin's level.
Да, генеральный штаб делает так, чтобы
Indeed, the General Staff is taking measures to avoid harming our enemy, and their stance is clear. On the battlefield, Russian soldiers may perish while destroying the enemy as they want, but all Western weapons supplied to Ukraine will reach the front lines, and every shell will be delivered to the front lines. While Putin may achieve some target successes and conduct an attack on NATO officers or military bases like Yvorovsky, there is no systematic destruction of Ukraine's military infrastructure, thus preserving our enemy's combat capabilities as much as possible. Our nuclear triad is under attack, but Ukraine's rear is not. Their stance is, "Come on, give me a break." Disrupt logistics there? No. This implies that we must act on a level that the Gasudar himself can enforce. During the meeting with the editors, what did Putin say?
Вот вы поставляете нам оружие, да? Вернее, не нам, Украине оружие, чтобы она била по территории России. Но мы же знаем, кто это делает. Мы же знаем, что Атакамс, значит, это американцы, Storm Shadow, это британцы, Скальп,
You,
это
the West, are providing Ukraine with weapons to target Russian territory. We are aware of who carries out these attacks. If we are talking about Atacams, then the Americans are doing it, Storm Shadow, the British, Scalp, the French, and so on. What prevents us from supplying weapons that could threaten the interests of these countries that are supplying weapons to be used against Russia and are using them against Russia? These weapons could be used against you by rebels in strategic regions around the world. After all, those colonial powers are facing resistance from rebels worldwide. Therefore, it is possible to provide missiles to the Houthis to sink an American aircraft carrier, rather than just causing damage as they had done previously. By the way, there is information that the Soviet Tochka-U missile hit Dwight Eisenhower, causing it to quickly leave the area to avoid being hit by the Houthis again. What if we supply them with regular missiles? It is not surprising that there are already jokes circulating on the internet that the Houthis apparently acquired hypersonic weapons. A production plant was built in just 3 hours. Therefore, Putin said, we are able to supply these weapons.
И вот здесь, чего бы там Герасимов не выдумывал, это можно обойти. И это оружие можно поставить в те регионы, которые нанесут
No matter what Gerasimov comes up with, These weapons can be placed in regions that will cause serious damage to the Americans, the French, and the Germans, or anyone else attempting attacks. Putin stated this publicly, but he did so as a warning. At SPEEF, he stated, "Let's reach agreements. Along this ladder of escalation, we can reach mutually assured destruction. But we will not retreat. You hope for the treachery of the Rus Zion elites. Yes, it is present, it is full scale, but the Russian people and the Russian army will ensure that if you try to attack Russia, you will cease to exist. Yes, Russia may cease to exist as well. But we will go to heaven, and you will simply perish." These are not just words. We have reached this brink, and the final warning has been sounded. Further, only a nuclear clash. This is the situation. Putin has shown that he will not surrender the country, despite the treachery of the entire Rus Zion elite, which is a widespread, full-scale treachery. In almost all government offices in Moscow, there are only traitors, pro-American lackeys. It's all for today. Well, what can I say in conclusion? They will not succeed in their plans. If they try to attack, we will not back down. Why should we have to perish, as they dream? No way. We are willing to die, but they will perish if they dare to attack.
Чтобы до этого не дошло, чтобы каждый на своем месте мог укрепить ресурсный потенциал страны, чтобы мог противостоять.
To prevent such a situation, empower the country's resource potential, and resist the treachery of the Rus Zion elite, everyone must know how to govern complex social supersystems, such as states.
И тогда, занимаясь своей обыденной деятельностью, человек сможет либо укреплять.
By being knowledgeable about this, people can contribute to strengthening certain processes and halting others in their everyday lives.
Он сможет.
This knowledge will enable them to counteract our enemies who seek to destroy Russia, whether it be Nabiullina or others. Nabiullina is merely a frontman. Stupid, narrow-minded, and lacking knowledge, she has advanced her career solely on the belief that destroying Russia and its people is the key to success. She is the head of the central bank only due to such an attitude. As a professional, she is absolutely nobody.
Занимаясь своей обыденной деятельностью, защищая интересы своей и своей семьи.
Therefore, by engaging in your daily activities and protecting the interests of yourself and your family, you can help protect the state, ensure a peaceful life, and secure a bright future for your children. However, this can only be achieved if you know how to govern complex social supersystems. This way, you can make your own decisions as to which processes to become part of, rather than being dragged into them against your will. Look at what Ukraine has been dragged into and what they are dragging Kazakhstan into. Georgia lacks sovereignty entirely. Truth be told, in Georgia, there are processes occurring through which globalists of the global predictor are assisting us. Look at what is occurring in Armenia and other so-called states. In order for you to work for your interests, your motherland, your family, you must understand how complex social supersystems and states are governed. This knowledge is only available from one source, the works of the internal predictor of the USSR. For the current strong maneuver, we have prepared the 3-volume book, War State Bolshevism, in advance. The first volume, State, discusses the nature of a state and examines whether all states are the same, distinguishing between engineered states and historical states. An engineered state is designed for a specific project. The second volume, War, delves into various methods of waging wars and provides a comprehensive definition of warfare. What is the solution to escape this nightmare? The solution is always found in Russian Bolshevism. Those people who have experienced, so to speak, Russia's occupation and lived within the Russian world often long to return to the Russian world. Sociological studies now reveal that people in the former German Democratic Republic, who once considered themselves under occupation, actually desire to return to the Russian world. It turns out that German culture, German language, all German flourished within it without any suppression. However, they are now experiencing degradation and destruction in the so-called free democratic world. In Russian Bolshevism, there is salvation for the whole world. Salvation for the entire world lies in the Russian world. However, this can only be achieved if all people, based on collective activity and public initiative, work together to establish the Russian world, the Russian state, do the same that was initially done to build it. This is why such a vast territory was encompassed, with numerous peoples included, where everyone felt comfortable until it was divided due to the cataclysms of the 20th century, both at the beginning and the end of the century. For this particular maneuver, we wrote the work, State Symbols and State Sovereignty. By looking at the flag, you can immediately determine what each state represents. For example, Iran is now emerging as a Euro-Asian governance concentration center of global-level responsibility. However, Iran's flag symbolizes the custodian of the territory, indicating a lower status. India has a similar flag but with a slightly higher status. Why? This is because the Iranian flag features Arabic script with the phrase, Allah is great, repeated 22 times. In contrast, the Indian flag depicts the wheel of samsara without any ligature. Therefore, the Iranian flag holds a lower status. However, it clearly indicates that this state entity has been chosen as the instrument of the global predictor, and when the necessary state actor is established, the flag will be changed. Those who do not understand state symbols will not be able to interpret this ornament correctly. Some may see it as an inscription, while others may view it simply as an ornament, but that is their problem. The key point is that in the sense of state symbols, it is shown, this is the territory of the global predictor, where a state actor is being established for specific tasks. In India, the flag holds a higher status, representing India as an independent actor, the custodian of the territory. The wheel of samsara in the center symbolizes something eternal being preserved. India is the oldest fascist state in the world, and this aspect is meant to endure forever, like a breeding ground where this regime in India is meant to thrive. The flag of Iran clearly signifies that Iran is planned to serve as a specific instrument, as depicted in the flag itself. By reading the book, State Symbols and State Sovereignty, one can gain insight into any country and understand its current representation and future prospects. Once again, the flag of Iran is an example of such an indicator for the future. Brazil is also a mere custodian of territory, represented by a flag of lower status compared to the Iranian flag. But at the same time, it is interesting to note that in the 19th century, a different flag was planned for Brazil when it gained, so to speak, sovereignty. That is, understanding state symbols can help clarify many issues. You will be able to comprehend the intricacies of the politics of all countries if you know the flag and its significance, the position of the state in the hierarchy, and its future focus. Our partners have published a supplement to the 3-volume set, War State Bolshevism, which is a collection of analytical notes titled, Fleet is Being, in the series, about the world of crooked mirrors. This book can be used as a standalone source. Currently, the issue of the central bank is very acute, and there is a question regarding the Constitution. The collection contains separate analytical notes on these specific issues. It can be used separately, not even as a supplement to the 3-volume set, War State Bolshevism. If used as a supplement, it simply expands the understanding of the issues described in the 3-volume set. To complement the first and second editions of the 3-volume set, War State Bolshevism, our partners have released an additional volume of materials that will be included in the upcoming 3rd edition. I don't know the release date for the 3rd edition. It is currently uncertain due to certain issues. However, this standalone volume contains valuable information, particularly useful for the special military operation for demilitarization and denazification, as it includes discussions on the size of the army and the importance of drill training. We are told, no, drill training is unnecessary. What for? The additional volume provides fundamental, methodological research on various topics, such as how they surrendered sovereignty, the colonial system, and others. This volume can be used independently, not only as a supplement to the 3-volume set, War State Bolshevism. Our partners have published the series, Library of Conceptual Knowledge. The volume, on economics, has been published. The volume, on imitative and provocative activities, has been published to understand the activities of public opinion leaders and to distinguish between those who are genuinely working and those who are merely imitating such activities. The volume, Sufficiently General Theory of Governance, has been published, which is the backbone of the conception of public safety. The volume, Ah Yes, Pushkin, has been published, focusing on the conceptual essence of Pushkin's work, and we recently celebrated the anniversary of his birth. Another volume, Matrix is Different from Matrix, has been published, discussing matrix governance. Read these and other books by the Internal Predictor to become conceptually powerful, protect your own and your family's interests, and, in doing so, protect the interests of your state, ensuring a peaceful life on the planet and a bright future for your children. Peaceful sky above your head. Happiness. See you next time.